about wearing a priestly collar in public is that people tell you way more about their lives than maybe they should. As soon as a person realizes you're a priest, the floodgates open, and all of a sudden you're a guest on the everything you wanted to know about church but were afraid to ask show. I get questions about how one becomes a priest, what being an Episcopalian means, and what kind of Christian I am. But mostly I get confessions. People will confess that they used to go to church, but once they became an adult, they had a hard time believing everything that the church taught them as a child. People will confess that they were raised in the church, but when a terrible tragedy hit, they felt abandoned by God and could never go back. People will confess that they miss going to church, but they always feel like they don't belong when they go to church. That everyone in church seems to have their lives all figured out except for them. What's interesting to me about these conversations with non-churchgoers or lapsed Christians is that they seem to think that their struggles with faith make them ineligible for church membership. Perhaps that may be true in other denominations in our country. But one of the primary reasons I became an Episcopalian was because the Episcopal Church not only made room for faith struggles, but expected those struggles. Almost every time I've raised a question in a Bible study, instead of someone explaining the answer to me, the response is almost always, yeah, that is a hard piece of Scripture. Almost every time I've been with a grieving family who's on the brink of questioning their faith, no one in the room has challenged them. Usually someone says, I can totally see how you would be doubting God right now. And almost every time I've been in a class about theology or the creeds or confirmation or baptism, someone has asked, what if I can't believe that part? Never once has a person been told they cannot belong if they do not believe. In fact, usually the person is praised for naming the lack of faith that we all have at some point in our spiritual journey. I think that's why today's gospel lesson feels so real. The disciples and the apostles have been following Jesus for weeks, and Jesus has been handing them a lot of heavy stuff. Jesus has told them to give up their possessions, to forgive those who wrong them, to take up their cross. I can't imagine anyone looking at the stark life that Jesus describes and not calling out, increase our faith. How else can we be all that Jesus wants us to be without increasing our faith? Surely we have all had those trough moments. In the face of our mortality, at the betrayal of a friend or spouse, in the midst of anxiety and stress, when we too cry out to God, increase our faith. What might be helpful is to talk a little bit today about what we mean about faith. Marcus Borg talks about two different kinds of faith: faith of the head and faith of the heart. Faith of the head is claiming something about God or about the human condition. This kind of faith is more about what we believe. When someone says that they have lost their faith, often they mean this kind of faith of the head. They no longer believe something taught by Holy Scripture or the church. In the Episcopal Church, we don't tend to get too upset about this kind of faith struggle. Instead, we see faith as ever evolving and growing. Questioning is at the root of a deep and mature faith. Borg would argue that God cares very little about what beliefs are in our heads, as we believe the right things. Borg knows that you can believe all the right things and still be in bondage, because believing a set of claims to be true has very little transformative power. Now, unlike faith of the head, faith of the heart is a little different. Faith of the heart is characterized by three things: trust, fidelity, and vision. Faith of the heart means putting a radical trust in God, to rely on God for grounding and safety. Faith of the heart is also characterized by fidelity, an understanding that we will be faithful to our relationship with God and God with us. Faith of the heart is characterized by vision, a belief that reality is life-giving and nourishing instead of threatening or hostile. To live in faith requires a radical centering of our lives in God that leads to deepening trust that transforms the way we see and live our lives. So when the disciples asked Jesus to increase their faith, they're not necessarily asking Jesus to help them believe certain statements about God to be true, that faith of the head. Instead, they're asking for faith of the heart, to get help in trusting God, remaining faithful in the relationship with God, and seeing life as God-given and gracious. Now, one would hope that Jesus would hear this request from the apostles and come back with a loving response, a pastoral word of encouragement that makes them feel affirmed in their fears, doubts. Unfortunately, that's not what Jesus does today. Instead, he tells an abrasive story about masters and servants, which is basically Jesus' way of saying, you want your faith to increase? Get out there and do the work you've been given to do. Instead of assuring and coddling those apostles, Jesus sounds a lot more like that old Nike ad that says, just do it. Now, I don't know about you, but Jesus' words are not all that comforting to me today. I've sat with someone who's overwhelmed by the disappointments of life, and never once did it occur to me to tell them to just go out and do the work they've been given to do. I've counseled people who are facing death, divorce, job loss, and shame. And not once did it occur to me to tell them to stop complaining and just get back to the work God calls them to do. I myself have had moments where God felt absent, and I probably would have deemed the counsel to just do it as unfair. To just trust that God is there and get back to work. Where are we supposed to find strength to be faithful, to trust, to be loyal, to hold on to the vision of God's goodness when we feel unable to just do it? As I struggled with Jesus' harshness this week, I turned to Paul's second letter to Timothy that we heard today. Paul tells Timothy, I am reminded of your sincere faith, the faith that lived first in your grandmother Lois and your mother Eunice, and now, I am sure, lives in you. Paul's words this week help me see how we get back to that work Jesus has given us to do. In Paul's encouragement, he's confident that Timothy can just do it because he knows Timothy's identity. Timothy is the grandson of Lois and the son of Eunice. These women have taught him everything he knows about Jesus. They've been through those depths of despair themselves, and yet they are faithful servants of God. Timothy's not just a man fighting for his faith. Timothy is known by God and comes from a long line of people who have walked with God. Timothy's heritage is a heritage of people who have gone before, who've shown him the way to live through their lives, and who've encouraged him. Now you may be sitting there thinking, yeah, except my grandmother is a Southern Baptist who disagrees with what I believe, or my mom stopped going to church ages ago. Whether biological or not, we all have grandmothers and mothers of our faith. Maybe they're friends or fellow parishioners. Maybe they are those mothers and grandmothers who are the matriarchs of our faith. Regardless, we are all rooted in something bigger than ourselves. Something with much deeper roots than we can ever have, and that ground us when we feel like we are flailing in our faith. When I first read our gospel lesson this week, I thought we had been cursed with the wrong lessons, especially for those of you who brought friends today. But the more the lessons unfolded, the more I realized that they might actually be the perfect lessons. We all struggle with our faith. Certainly that faith of the head, but more importantly, the faith of the heart. As Paul reminds us, we come from a long line of people who have gone before and who have struggled just as we do, and who leaned into their identity as beloved children of God in order to keep putting one foot in front of the other. We are encouraged today because we have seen the fruit of just doing it. We have prayed for someone struggling this week. We have called or visited a friend who needed encouragement this week. We stood up to a bully this week. We gave money to support a ministry this week. We did something seemingly inconsequential. Those small, everyday acts of faith are powerful, and they are how we answer Jesus' call to just do it, even when we didn't think we could. Paul and the church remind us that we can. We can do those acts of faith because we are surrounded by matriarchs and patriarchs who encourage us along the way. We all have those moments when we just want Jesus to increase our faith. Today, we are encouraged by doing. Eventually, our faith increases in spite of us.